Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and start now. Um, so thank you everyone who was able to come to the Bruin AI Responsible AI Hackathon workshop number two. This will be conducted by Dr. Alan Young. Um, Dr. Alan Young is an experienced practicing physician and client partner at management consulting firm Point B, and he helps lead Point B's health and life science practice, which supports client services and business development in transformation technology, innovation, and value-based care. He's passionate about appropriate use of technology such as artificial intelligence to improve operating efficiency for physicians, and he previously was an expert at McKinsey and Company and chief medical officer for early stage healthcare technology startups using AI to improve patient and physician experiences. I'll let Dr. Alan Young now take over.
Great. Thanks, Siobhan. Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up for those that are on video. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. All right. Well, great to meet you all. I'm going to try to make the most of this time we have together. I know you guys have a long week ahead of you with the hackathon. And this is meant to give you a deep dive into healthcare to help you as you think about solutions that may be in the healthcare industry. Um, just kind of a quick agenda for what hope to cover today. If you want to be interactive, feel free to raise your hand if there's questions that come up. Otherwise, the second half of the hour, we're going to be going over kind of real life case studies. And so that's when I expect everyone to kind of come off mute and either use the chat or come on the speaker and raise questions and ideas. So feel free to do whatever you're comfortable with. I'll give a quick introduction of myself, talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, artificial intelligence today in healthcare and recent updates, opportunities that we've seen in healthcare from my perspective and from my company's perspective, certain challenges and barriers. We'll highlight certain rules and laws that you guys should be aware of as you start to design solutions that might be involving healthcare data. And then we'll go through an industry case studies, and that was where we can be interactive and you can feel free to ask questions and chime in with ideas, and I'm happy to validate. And then if we have time at the end, a Q&A. All right, let's get started. So just by way of introduction, I'm a physician, but I wasn't always a physician. I've done a couple of other things as well. So back when I was young and had more hair, I was actually born and raised in Canada, grew up near Vancouver, BC, came down to Los Angeles to finish an undergrad degree at UCLA, so go Bruins. Went on to USC for medical school and business school. They had a dual degree program for MD, MBA students. Then went on to do my clinical training in orthopedic surgery down in UC Irvine. Shortly after that, I went on to Kaiser Permanente and started working in a what's called surgical urgent care position that was more outpatient primary care work that required surgical skills. And then my career diverted a little bit. I became a consultant at Deloitte and continued to practice medicine though. I then went back to USC to serve as a director for the strategy and operations side of the medical group. Helped open an urgent care clinic in Henry Mayo in Santa Clarita, just north of UCLA. Then went back to consulting with Accenture and helped lead the electronic health record work that we were doing to bring doctors from using paper, pens, and pencils to write prescriptions onto the electronic health record world where you actually type into a computer and have data and digital capabilities. Joined another firm called Slalom, helped them build their healthcare life sciences practice here in LA. And then we got involved in a bunch of extracurricular stuff, which involved AI. HIMSS is a health IT organization. Scale Health is down the street from UCLA, is kind of a healthcare incubator. The Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, I found myself leading the LA chapter. Started working in urgent care and concierge medicine around Los Angeles, and then joined an early stage startup called Giant at the time that was using machine learning to create chatbot, digital front door, and other kind of solutions that we were selling to major health systems. Some of our first clients were organizations like Intermountain Healthcare, Geisinger, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, a few well-known healthcare entities. Then during the pandemic, I joined Safe Health. I was looking to use computer vision for COVID testing, and then eventually joined Kila Health, which was using surgical patient data to predict surgical outcomes and complications. Realize the startup world, as you guys can imagine, can be quite volatile. I opted to go back to a safer career path, went back to consulting with McKinsey, and then started advising a company called Belson before joining Point B. And now on the side, in addition to my full-time job, I'm a mentor and advisor to healthcare startups through the Techstars Healthcare Accelerator. That's currently working with USC, the Founder Institute, which is a global accelerator program for early stage startups, the Cedars-Sinai Accelerator, which is run through the hospital, and the KidsX Accelerator out of CHLA, which has a partnership now with CancerX, which is run through the Center for Medicare Services, CMS or HHS. So happy to be here. I have a lot of experiences and stuff that I can hopefully share with you guys, but let's go through the content. So just to touch upon quickly, when you think about inventing something and creating something as an entrepreneur, as you're developing solutions, these are kind of 10 things that I found to be good key ingredients to making a successful invention. And just like every cake or cookie, every recipe is slightly different. So this is just my opinion and some influence from places like the Entrepreneur magazine. You want to bring passion to whatever it is you're doing. You want to be excited about it. You want to be, attached to it. You want to be invested in it. And that shows as a founder or as a, entrepreneur, you want to be able to be really excited about what you're trying to build. You want to achieve what's called higher value density, meaning that you want to do something that's going to create more value as opposed to take away value. So if you thinking of solving a problem, you don't want to make something that's more expensive, takes more time, that's more difficult to understand. That's not helping anyone and will likely cause you to have to exit that market. You want to address a gap in the market. So you don't want to go where everyone else is going. You want to try to fill a void or kind of solve a blind spot, if you will, or a pain point. So that's something you'll probably hear from people in the industry as they complain about things or don't seem to have a good solution for something. Or if you notice something in your observations, feel free to go after it. You want to be able to articulate a high ROI or return on investment, meaning that if someone is to invest money into your solution, what are they going to get in it in return? How much money are they going to make? How much money are they going to save? Are they going to be able to improve their kind of qualitative or quantitative measures of success? You also want to keep things simple, right? Don't overcomplicate things. If you don't need the latest and greatest large language model or Gen AI capabilities, you don't need to go buy NVIDIA's newest GPU. Keep it simple. Solve the problems, start small, aim small, generate early success, and then move on. And then follow a clear path to market. You want to be able to identify who your customers are, what the total addressable market looks like, what you actually can hope to achieve in the short term, and then take steps towards that. You also want to go where it's attractive, right? I mean, if doesn't seem to be any investment at all into AI for pottery making or AI for, sorting through, your clothes at home before you do laundry, right? Like things that maybe don't need a solution, you probably want to avoid those. Identify your customers, and then if you want to be an entrepreneur or do something really dramatic, right, confirm it is within your personal limits. Are you willing to have many sleepless nights? Are you willing to fail? Are you willing to be told no or get rejected by investors or even your family members tell you this is, not a great idea. You should make something with your life, like go to UCLA and get a degree or something, right? I mean, you probably will have a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur and an inventor. So you want to be able to make sure that that's within your personality. And then you want to try to avoid gotchas or hidden challenges. And this is kind of the tricky part, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. If you've never done this before or you're going into a new venture, there's always going to be things that are come up unexpectedly. And I think this is, where the value of getting mentors, key opinion leaders, like, partners and a team will really help you. I think one of the things in healthcare that we've realized is that as there's been a lot of innovation, there seems to be more and more need for what we call kind of clinical consulting leaders or clinical leaders, right? This has really been because the healthcare industry historically has been really resistant to any rapid changes or outsiders coming in and telling, for example, doctors or nurses what to do. The practice of medicine is based on a lot of literature and studies and research. and a lot of memorization, anatomy, and biochemistry and physiological science stuff, right? And these have been going around, and how you treat a strep throat has been around for a long time. So a lot of things and patterns have been established. But, there's been a lot of advances because of major events such as COVID-19, telemedicine, digital health, drug discovery using, AI, vaccine development, 3D printing, and, most recently and most relevant is artificial intelligence. All these things have really disrupted the industry and given clinicians a challenging environment to work in. However, I really think that clinicians still understand the best what's actually happening day to day in most healthcare settings. Could be a clinic, could be a hospital, could be the operating room, the emergency department. It definitely helps you as an inventor or an entrepreneur to get the insights and perspective of a clinician if you can. There's a book out there called Digital Health Entrepreneurship. My friend and mentor, Dr. Arlen Myers, published it. I was lucky enough to contribute a chapter. So things like that are just showing you how physicians are getting more involved in kind of new technology and innovation. Just a quick summary of where AI is today. I think the past few years, especially, have seen explosive kind of, really dramatic adoption of AI, especially since ChatGPT came out. I think everyone and their grandmothers know what AI can do now, but healthcare still lags behind. We're one of the industries where it's just not really been adopted as quickly or as effectively as you'd think. And so there's a challenge. And even reading straight from the headlines, this is from a Rock Health weekly newsletter that released yesterday. So it tells you how long when I prepared my slides, there's a few, announcements that were made. Amazon, it has a new chatbot. Now chatbots are cool. When our company had a chatbot, no one really believed in it. But now since Amazon does it, I think everyone trusts these chatbots a little bit more. Their chatbot is Health AI and helps answer questions and obviously directs you to the right care or product on the Amazon website that you should buy. Google released a what people suggest feature to help you understand. Let's say you have like psoriasis or eczema or asthma. Like it actually goes through patient forums and chats and then filters up what other like normal people are suggesting how to solve these problems. Maybe drink a lot of honey or hang upside down or whatever it is, right? So you can see that this crowdsourcing may or may not be the best, recommendations. Definitely may not be based specifically in the, previous medical literature that's up there. Apple, many of you have an iPhone. I just got my new iPhone and it's more confusing than ever. But their health app is now Health Plus and it has an AI-enabled coach to help you share personalized insights from your wearables. So I have a Apple Watch on and I went to the gym and couldn't figure out how to use it to track what I was doing. But if the coach suddenly pops up and said, "Hey, you're doing things wrong," or you need to, lower your heart rate, or you need to drink some water, like that'd be kind of powerful, I think, right? Rather than me, putzing around the gym and hurting myself. And Samsung has formed a partnership with Stanford Medicine to develop a Galaxy Watch sleep health feature that has clinical validation, meaning that there's doctors or specialists that are saying, yeah, whatever we put onto this watch should be, medically valid and you should be able to trust it, right? So many of you have a Galaxy watch can look out for this, new partnership with Stanford and Samsung, because if it's from Stanford Health, I'm sure you'll trust it a little bit more than if it's just from Samsung. So switching gears, just talking a little bit about areas that maybe as you think about solving problems in healthcare, you want to focus on. These are probably, a little outdated, meaning that these are things that our company and the industry in general has been focused on for probably a couple of years now. Omni-channel healthcare, meaning can we get our care from different places? Do we have to go and drive to a clinic, wait in line, find parking, wait in a waiting room, see a doctor for 7 minutes, and then, get kicked out and go to the pharmacy? Are there other options? Can you use your phone? Can you use your iPad? Can you use your laptop and have a telemedicine visit, such as now, and have the doctor really, give you the information you need? There are devices that my friends have invented over the years and clinic rooms that you could just walk into and there's no one there, but it could take your heart rate, your blood pressure, your oxygenation level, detect if you have any weird things on your skin, and then the doctor on the other end interprets the data, maybe with AI, and then tells you what you need to do. And you leave the room or the clinic and you never saw the doctor, in real time, but you got everything you needed and got a pretty confident diagnosis or a plan from that. Um, Growth for the future, all these organizations are trying to grow. Like healthcare is primarily nonprofit, but there's a lot of effort to try to keep making money and try to attract more patients. So how can you help organizations grow? What attracts patients to them? Where are they going to get more business from? That's something that's top of mind for most executives. Consumer and retail health. I don't know the last time you guys have gone to a mall, but you've probably seen that there's been, some interesting healthcare options. Some have come and gone. If you go to the airport, there's like these little pods that you can walk into and maybe get healthcare. You can, go into a pharmacy or a retail store and get your blood pressure measured and get consultations there. And a lot of places are trying to take away business, for example, from the major health systems and hospitals. So you maybe don't need to go to UCLA's clinic anymore. You can go to your, Lululemon store, and then they may be able to give you like some advice and some medical care because they have a scanner that looks at your bone density or your exercise levels, right? These are kind of things to think about as consumer and retail health becomes more popular. Value-based care is something that might be unfamiliar to some of you, but it's really thinking about how can we deliver care at a lower cost with better outcomes and have this be sustainable that doctors and patients kind of buy into this model. So the idea is not to see as many patients as you can and do as many surgeries and make money. It's more about how can you do a procedure or take care of a patient that has diabetes or cancer in the most kind of high quality way and the most cost effective way, and then be able to do this for others as well. So that in essence, you'll be helping the healthcare system like be more effective. And it may not be the best or the expected care for an individual, but you're doing something for the population. And workforce strategy is the big challenge, I think, even more so now as people are looking for other options to make a living. I think, healthcare clinicians used to be a very noble profession, very predictable. You kind of go to school for a lot of years, you see patients, you work hard, you work long hours, very rewarding, right? But nowadays, it's changed. There's AI, there's telemedicine, there's virtual care, there's kind of avatars that replace, the doctor. There's people that don't even want to see a doctor. They don't want to drive anywhere. They just want to get their medications drone lifted to them from Amazon, right? Or order medications from Mark Cuban's company, Cost Drug Plus or something that'll be affordable. So there's a lot of different challenges to delivery of healthcare and to still find the right mix of nurses and doctors and social workers and physical therapists that will actually do the traditional medicine stuff is getting more challenging. And so automation and AI has played a role to help alleviate some of the burden, especially as the world's population continues to grow. I think we're rapidly approaching 8 billion the last time I checked. And the number of people that are aging is proportionally higher now, and people are living longer. So you're going to have this aging elderly population, that requires care. And if there's not enough doctors and nurses to take care of them, there's got to be a different solution, right? So maybe some of you can think about solving that. So point B has kind of helped in the industry and looked at our data and analytics practice to really derive things that have been, the foundation or the backbone of most AI today. We focus on things around data strategy and road mapping, platforms and analytics, creating insights, managing your data, repositories, providing governance, creating new products and how to operationalize them, right? We've worked across industries, so we kind of gain insights that, healthcare is not the only place and the best place to get ideas. There's a lot of industries out there that we help, including, well-known companies like Disney and Microsoft and Toyota, et cetera. So when we think about data architecture, it's really about, understanding all the different, we'll quote unquote, call them products or building blocks, right? And where you're getting the ingestion of this data from and where they're coming from and what kind of capabilities do this data help inform, right? Then from there, once you've sourced your data, you've acquired your data, you then have to kind of manipulate the data. It has to conform, you have to improve the data quality, fill in the gaps, run it through your, your data platforms, run it through your models and analytics, derive the insights, and then tie this back to what you're actually going to deliver or how it's going to inform your product or your solution, right? So could be an API that's calling for the insights that you're getting. Could be, the data is driving, decision making at the bedside or at the executive level or on the supply chain, understanding sourcing of like key medical supplies like rubber gloves or face masks or ingredients for pharmaceuticals. All these things can be driven, by this data supply chain. And, automating this in a repeatable, reliable way is really kind of the foundation of a strong modern data architecture. So digging a little deeper, if we take health providers as an example, and if some of you have experience with, yourselves being in the hospital or clinic or family members who are doctors, this is still going to be, overly complex considering many of these things just you never come across as a patient and as a doctor. Like, thinking about, you know, the pharmacy and the planning for building a new building or thinking about registries for patients and the recovery areas in the hospital and dealing with risk stratification of your patients. All these little things are areas where data is feeding into, and if you can create the right capabilities around it, you can actually make things a more efficient, B, increase the speed to kind of end, right? Like instead of having maybe humans manually review the contracting of new employees, have it be automated, right? Use your AI agents to run through that. Forecasting for next fiscal year, understanding your budget constraints. Like accountants and CFOs are doing this, but now I think a lot of it, you don't need to be a master of Excel and be able to run these formulas. You can just plug your queries and your prompts into the data lake, and it could probably find the information you need and produce a report for you in very little time. So there's a lot of business objectives that fall under the healthcare provider world, and thinking about them as like distinct capabilities may help you kind of pinpoint where you can maybe solve a problem or two. We kind of filtered it down into like 6 indicators for success. And, what we try to do is when we ever think about solving a problem or thinking about a product or a solution, we really want to start with clear goals and objectives, right? Measurable, quantified, objectives within a reasonable time frame. They call them SMART goals, right? Subjective, like specific, measurable, obtainable, reasonable, time bound. You also want to understand the bottlenecks and inefficiencies that you're trying to deal with and what it'll take to overcome those, right? Next is processes. You have to understand workflows. And I think that's the challenge for folks that aren't in medicine or practicing medicine, like understanding what actually happens to a patient before they come in for their knee replacement surgery. They show up and then they go home like a few days later. What actually happens in between? A lot of different steps take place, right? And so understanding the workflow and where it makes sense for AI to be a companion or an intervention or where AI shouldn't be involved, right? I mean, that's something that's very valuable to understand. Is if you think about successful implementations, you want to be able to draw or map out these workflows and processes pretty effectively. You want to make sure your technology is mature enough and can be robust and survive the rigors of being put into the wild, right? You can't have an application that, crashes after like the first 10 patients log into it, right? Or if a doctor presses the wrong button, everything freezes, right? You want to make sure your technology is reliable, your integration is solid, you've done your testing and debugging and prototyping in order to make sure that you have maturity and credibility. I think that's a big failure point for a lot of early companies. They rush out to get like a MVP or minimal viable product out there, and they maybe forego some beta testing, and then they show it to some doctors and it just fails and crashes. You only get 1 or 2 chances, probably just one chance to really convince someone who doesn't understand your technology to believe in you if the first time they use it, it fails, right? So you don't get that opportunity very often, especially if you're in front of like clinical leaders or executive leaders. You want to make sure your ROI is defined. We talked about this, like what is return on investment? Why would an organization spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars on your company and your tool if there's no benefit for them, right? It's costing them more money than what it's generating or creating new problems. A lot of kind of motivation in healthcare is to make things more modern and newer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a better solution, right? So you got to be careful that your ROI is clearly defined and understood. You got to make sure the organization is ready. And sometimes, when an example for us was trying to implement electronic health records to doctors that basically refused to use them. They said, no, we're not going to use it. A well-known hospital here in California had an implementation take place, and our company was helping. And then we found out the doctors and said, we're not going to use this. We're just going to go back to writing on paper again. And so they totally circumvented this new technology and just went back to writing things on paper. You can imagine how frustrating it was for the CIO and the CEO and CFO who spent millions of dollars to buy new technology, but the organization wasn't ready. They weren't bought in from the beginning. They weren't included in the process. And they just decided, hey, we don't have to do this. We'll do it a different way. So you got to be careful to make sure that your product or solution is going to be well received. And then you also make sure that things that you do manage to demonstrate, they're sustainable. Sometimes things are very short-lived, like, oh, we can reduce costs by 10%. But then after the first 6 months, that something goes down to minus 2%, or you're costing more money than you saved in the onset, right? So be wary of these initial surges of improvement and then everything kind of going back to baseline or getting even worse. And that's not something that people want to necessarily invest in or pay for. So just to highlight one kind of roadblock I've seen a lot of organizations struggle with, especially if they're not aware of it. And I'm sharing this just to kind of raise the awareness to say, oh yeah, HIPAA, everyone knows about that in healthcare. But if you're not from healthcare, you might not be aware of this Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which passed in 96, before many of you were born probably. And it really talks about allowing healthcare organizations to be responsible for a couple of things, that they can retain healthcare between jobs. That's one thing. They try to simplify administrative things by having rules around privacy, security, and when data breaches happen. Trying to reduce fraud, right? Trying to prevent healthcare organizations from like using taxpayer dollars to do things like buy yachts and purchase crypto, right? But the one aspect of HIPAA that we want to focus on is protecting what we call individually identifiable health information or protected health information for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? And this comes out through the requirement for standardized procedures and regulations to protect this data. And what does this data look like? So protected health information is, examples here on the table, but anything that can really identify an individual, based on information. So first things are obviously, oh, your name, your date of birth, right? But your diagnosis and your treatments and the medications that you're given, the dates of your visits to see your doctor, the health plan that you're on, the number, the health insurance card that you have, any paper records that are left behind, your imaging results. All these things are what HIPAA considers protected health information and could actually help identify like someone. So if it got into the wrong hands, you could see how sensitive it would be if a cancer diagnosis came out and one of you, accidentally leaked this to the public and people now know that this person has cancer or some other disease, right? I mean, you can see how sensitive this information is. So it used to be managed by paper, which is, that's why they kept these paper files in locked cabinets and closed the door behind them when they leave the clinic or hospital. But now everything is cloud-based and digital, right? But that's even more somewhat dangerous because now they can be acquired by foreign actors or hacked by folks from halfway around the world. So your personal health information could be floating in a cloud server in North Korea, in Russia, in China, in India, anywhere, right? So you got to be cautious of how you are going to deal with handling sensitive data if you think about applying AI in the healthcare industry. Oftentimes, this security and privacy is really overlooked during the design of these solutions. It's things are move quickly, fail fast. just keep going. Let's not worry about that stuff now. We don't have the money for it. We can't afford to do this. But you have to be cautious as you want to scale your impact. You want to be careful that it's not at the risk of patient confidentiality. And just to give you context, that if there are violations of the proper use and or storage, and if organizations are found to be in violation of HIPAA, the penalties could be anywhere from $100 to $2,000 per occurrence. So let's say you lost 10,000, patient records, right? If the fine turns out to be $2,000 per record, do the quick math, you're looking at a significant penalty, right? That would probably, for most organizations, be crippling. For an early stage company, it would just, take you out of the industry, right? Like you'd be done. So you got to be cautious that you're not held liable or responsible for violation of this data laws. All right. So what really prevents companies from getting meaningful insights from their data? Like, why can't these hospitals and clinics and doctors' offices do it themselves, right? Well, 65% lack the skill to connect the raw data to actual decision making. So just because you have the data doesn't mean you understand it, right? You can have all the financial data in the world and you don't recognize that you're losing money every month. Oftentimes, small businesses don't know that. They're like, oh, we're making a lot of revenue. And then they fail to understand the connection between revenue and cost and the difference between them. So connecting data to decision making is a big reason they don't get to the insights they need from their data. 70% have not aligned their data strategy to the enterprise strategy. So if you think about your organization, what your organization is trying to do, let's say, your organization is trying to cure cancer and you're over here trying to, see as many patients as you can, right? And so you're trying to gather as many patient records and, collect them. Well, that doesn't really help the enterprise strategy, and they're not going to really care they have more patients, right? They want to make sure that the patients are getting the right treatment, the right care. And so the data that you have is pretty much, not valuable to them. 80% of these organizations failed to meet objectives with their data analytics projects. So if you set measurable goals and objectives at the beginning and you invest time and money and you fail to reach them, well, that's not a good sign. That's usually a big indicator that you probably either have a poorly designed project or product and you're lacking the key requirements to really be successful. And 90% find that the problem is people and or process. So how many times, did you have the right solution, the best idea? Maybe you buy your family member the latest tech and they just don't know how to use it, or they don't want to use it, or they use it incorrectly, right? And so this is really something we see in the hospital setting very, very frequently, where organizations to come in and say, hey, we have a ability to solve this problem. All we got to do is just buy this software and let it run. It should be fine. But well, you still need people typically to click on it, to use it, to manage it the right way, to troubleshoot it. And if you don't have that, right, usually the people, or one of my friends and mentor recently said that if you have a broken process to begin with, putting technology or digital on top of that is just going to create a more expensive broken process, right? So oftentimes, if your workflows are not effective, it may not be automation that helps it. You're going to probably push things automatically through the bad workflow, and you end up with, no real gains in efficiency. And one of the other reasons is 80% of organizations will fail to scale their data and governance initiatives. And because they don't have not set up a clear understanding of what the data is being used for, how it can be used to create and generate business value, and how it should be managed and monitored over time. So data governance, is another key attribute to think about as you, consider creating a solution in healthcare that's going to, introduce or have access to data within a large enterprise. What is the governance of this? Who's going to be responsible? What are the controls you have in place to prevent security or, poor user adoption or bad patient experience? Think about, kind of the framework around it. All right, I'll stop here and see if there's any questions before we dive into some case studies. So feel free to come off the mute, raise your hand if you need to, but given this group seems pretty quiet, happy to just take whoever comes off online. Any questions? Any comments? All right. Well, this is your chance to warm up because now I'm gonna call on people. So if you guys are not actually at your computers, that'll be quite obvious. But we're gonna go into case studies, and these are kind of real life examples of projects that we've delivered that involve AI or product in healthcare. And so I'm going to ask like one or two of you for each case to just kind of brainstorm a couple of suggestions or ideas of how you would solve this problem. And then we'll go through what we did and then also show the results of that. All right, so let's get started. So if you guys can read the screen, I'll give you 30 seconds, just read the challenge, and then I'll ask for volunteers. If not, I'll call on people and go down the list to see if who has some ideas around this case. All right. Shivang, I'll have you break the ice since you are gracious to host us. Based on this challenge and case study, what are some ideas that you have for potential solution? How would you, your team, or if you want to create a product, what might you consider to help solve this? You got to come off mute. Yep. Any ideas?
Um, so just like reading through it, it says that there was like duplicate analytical products and people kind of didn't really have the information they needed.
Yep.
So I guess some sort of solution that kind of takes in and how so we have to somehow centralize that and make sure that it's clear and standardized. And so a solution
Yep.
that incorporates something like that.
Yep. That's a good start. Just gonna go down the list here. Anita, Jalili, do you have any thoughts or ideas that might be helpful to solve this challenge?
Hi, just going off what the previous speaker said.
Oh, sorry, you just muted yourself.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
There you go.
I'm going off what he said. I'm just trying to read the prompt and think of an idea, but just the centralization is important, but I have nothing to add of yet.
No problem. This is meant to, again, show you a little bit of the complexity of solving problems in healthcare. So this is the first one. So thank you both for your ideas. You're spared for any future call outs. So let me see if I can get the screen to advance here. So this is kind of the solution that we came up with, right? So we interviewed stakeholders to really understand what was going on. We developed a vision or mindset for how to evaluate, current technology against new technologies that they might consider. We helped them design a new architecture to manage the data and the assets. We recommended a change in their operating model, a structure that's both you guys called out, centralize the data and analytics resources while still maintaining expertise. We created roadmaps and we led a series of workshops to introduce the product, right? So kind of give you an idea, like the challenge sounds kind of straightforward, but the solution oftentimes is going to be a lot more complex and nuanced, right? And as a result of that, they aligned, they backlogged a number of products. They created more visibility. The teams were equipped with their roadmaps And you created a network of what they call change champions to help manage this change, right? So it wasn't just about the solution, right? You kind of had to create and understand the process, the future state, and how you could get people there. All right. Next case. Kind of get a feel of it now. So for those that I'm going to call on next, go ahead and read the challenge and then just kind of think about what you might do to start solving it. Maybe we'll start with Claire, if you're there. If you can come off mute and just share some thoughts or if you have questions about the challenge.
Sorry. I'm still finishing reading this. Can we have someone else
No
go
problem.
first?
Yep, take your time. And then I'll also ask Glory to also chime in. So if whoever has some thoughts first between Claire and Glory, feel free to suggest some ideas of how we can solve this problem. So there are some similarities to the last challenge, so that's a hint. So Claire, any ideas of where you would start or some things you would think would be important to solving this problem, either with a new product or a new solution?
Yeah, I think we can first start by just looking at the current state and trying to define that, as well as any shared vision, looking maybe at like government and trying to align with any regulations that we need to.
Yeah, great thought. Glory, are you there? Can you come off mute and share? All right. Oh, there we go.
I'm here. Hi.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share some ideas around this challenge? What would you do in addition to what Claire suggested?
Sure. Thanks for including me. Well, I think the primary issue is that um, so they're trying to go from one position, I guess, to being I won't say they're insightless, but they're trying to become a more insight-driven organization. So they want to become more data-driven, but they
Yep.
also know that their investments that are needed are it's a lot to do it. And so their decision to make what is called point B is assessing all of these things to try to reach this more data-driven or analytic maturity, as they say. So I would
Yep.
say, like, I mean, part of what I love about this, as someone who doesn't come from a medical background, is that you, I believe it's Dr. Young, right?
Yep.
So you've kind of like become a hybrid uh, individual in order to in order to be better at your practice of medicine. And I feel like this is an organizational example of that, of an entire medical organization that's traditionally been steeped in medical knowledge, medical wisdom, and medical practice. But they're wanting to become better, more data driven. So the fact that they're
Right.
moving in that direction, I would bring on a bunch of people who aren't doctors. And I would bring a bunch of people on who think completely differently, but are willing to engage, sympathetic to this larger institutional cause mission, and invite them to come and say, how would you like, maybe you can consult us on infrastructure, or how would you build these systems, and basically just start to open up their institutional mindset into a larger, wider, more expanded vision.
Great, Gloria, that's great. Yeah, you actually hit, one of the developments that's happened over the last few decades where providers, people who traditionally provide healthcare, and payers which were health plans, so they didn't touch patients, they've kind of started to merge. And, and this is an example of like a provider becoming a payvider, right? Like health plan and a health delivery network in one. And so, we did it as Claire suggested, did a current state assessment, understand what's going on, understand the gaps, right? We did interviews, we did workshops, really understand where they're trying to go and where they needed help. We understood their full set of data assets to create a model. And then, we evaluated their organization, the skill sets, and thought about what they needed to kind of live in that future state, and then came up with a plan. And, again, what they did was they did exactly what Glory suggested. They went outside and brought in non-healthcare providers to really help them navigate this, right? Because they didn't have that talent in-house, right? And so we were able to align, differing views. We were able to share a data and analytics strategy. We defined the architecture. We defined the core building blocks to build the model. And then we shared with them a realistic plan that they could use to address all of these, like primarily people-based, challenges, right? Like a lot of times, as we said before, it's not the technology that's hindering them, it's the people or the process. So great. Thank you both. We'll do one more, and then I want to open up to Q&A and help answer some questions. So this one's more on the life sciences side. So shorter challenge for a global pharmaceutical company. So let's see who's next. I think I saw maybe Meow and Sophie are next on my list. So if you guys want to take a few seconds to read it, and then just feel free to come off mute and offer some ideas on what you might do to start solving this problem. So Meow Sun or Sophie Zhu, if you guys want to come off mute and share some thoughts.
The challenge is to sort of partner to co-innovative ways, right?
Yeah, so this is a pharmaceutical company, like a drug company, and they're trying to accelerate clinical trials. And for those who may not be familiar, clinical trials are where you test your drug basically on patients that may or may not be sick, and they may be getting, and then you monitor to see how they improve. Most of the time, it's meant to test drugs that are hopefully going to help, improve care. But people have to sign up for these trials. They're intensive and costly. And so we're trying to help this company accelerate that process. And then they want to do it by giving their employees, so people who are helping run the trial, better information.
Yeah, okay. So I think we need to design a system to there's there may be machine learning or network.
That's a good start. How about Meow? Do you have any? Are you here?
Yeah, yeah.
Hello. Yeah, any other ideas to consider?
I think another idea may be to yeah, I just have this idea.
Don't share it?
Yeah, I just think this maybe machine learning would help.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're dealing with a lot of data, the employees probably don't have the ability to go through that data on their own. So we really wanted to create like a platform, like a better employee experience where they can go and access all of the data. So that would then surface, insights, the tools, the training, anything that they needed to do their job a little bit better. And so we helped them develop this product with a data backbone and obviously probably machine learning models to help assess that, right? And the result of this was the employees were able to be more effective because they had much more access to better, richer, personalized data. They could guide, clinical trials participants a little better and just enable the employees to really be more successful at their job, which translates into a better experience for patients, right, that are going through this. And we built it with a cloud-first approach to give better security and scalability. As the organization, expanded clinical trials, we could expand as well. So I think that's good for the case studies. There's a few more I prepared, but in the interest of time, just want to conclude my workshop and open up for Q&A. So, as you guys leave this workshop and finish the hackathon and hopefully attend the conference on Saturday, just remember, right? Like certain famous people have come before you, and this is a quote from Warren Buffett. If some of you are in the investor space or know of investors, that someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. So everything's got to start somewhere, right? So don't be afraid to take that first step and start something and build something. Another couple famous people, Jeff Bezos and Walt Disney. Jeff Bezos said, because resilience, if you think of it in terms of the gold rush, then you'd be pretty depressed right now because the last nugget of gold would be gone, right? So that's not the case, right? There's always going to be things that will maybe not go as you planned, but you got to be resilient and look for something else to really focus on. And then for Walt Disney, right, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So don't always just, think about doing things or talking about it. Just go ahead and try it, right? There's a lot of things out there that, problems that need to be solved, especially in healthcare. And if you have ideas, I would say share with others, get some traction, get some like validation, and then move forward, right? So that concludes the workshop content for this evening. I know it's late. We have about 5 minutes left for those that are still sticking around. I think we lost half the group. If you guys have any questions about healthcare, AI, or anything else, feel free to chime in, and I'll finally check the chat. Mostly AI note takers, but yeah, here we go. Venkat had a question. If hospitals are not always ready to adopt new technology, how can we effectively demonstrate its value and encourage adoption after implementation? Well, that's a great question. I think leaders at hospitals have been around for so long, and the consensus is that if there's something new that they need, they will recognize it, right? They will not like say, oh yeah, we don't need this. This is, ineffective. Like if they see something that really addresses what they are trying to solve and does it in a way that resonates with their requirements, their values, and their, price point, if you will, then, the adoption after implementation can be improved by top-down leadership, right? If you have a CEO of a company saying, hey, this is something we all need to get behind because, these entrepreneurs have decided, this is a way to solve this problem that we can solve ourselves. So just something to think about. They usually are resistant to change. So you got to, again, find ways to improve the adoption by, one of the principles earlier is keep it simple, right? Another question. Do you think medical practice is taking full advantage of technological process? In your opinion, what field of medicine is most willing to adopt outside of pharmacy? What field is most resistant to medical adoption? So loaded question. First part, no, I don't think medical practices are taking advantage of technology. A lot of it is still based on old routines and processes, especially for patient data and billing and, things related to the financial side. What field of medicine is most willing to adopt? I think it's a lot of adoption happen in fields like radiology and cardiology, where they deal with a lot of data, a lot of images, a lot of information that, they just don't have time. And then these folks have tended to be more, I would say, tech savvy within medicine. Like radiologists have to understand physics and how, X-rays and CTs work, and cardiologists have to understand the physics behind how a heart pumps and the physiology behind that, right? So they a little bit more inclined technically, and so they've adopted at least AI much faster. A lot of these orgs have, spent a lot of time and been the first few specialties, I think, that adopted AI. The ones that haven't are probably the ones that are, don't receive as much attention or funding. So psychiatry, I think is catching up, but initially they probably didn't have a lot of technology adoption and primary care and pediatrics. OBGYN probably lacked people coming in and telling them, hey, here's the newest AI thing, you should use it, right? I think the surgical fields, the specialty fields, places where a lot of money is being generated, like plastic surgery, dermatology, probably we're adopting technology a little bit better. And let's see. Anita, are most health-driven tech adopted because of potential for profit, or is there something that could be implemented for positive patient outcomes? Yeah, it has to be an ROI. Profit is not the only return on investment. If it's, again, improving outcomes, like extending the life of a cancer patient or reducing the complications from diabetes, I think a lot of health tech adoption is based on that as well as part of it. Altruistically, I think people in healthcare tended to come into healthcare because they wanted to make a difference and feel good about their job. And so if it was all driven by profit, I think, we should have all went into investment banking, or finance or something, right? So the adoption is not just driven by profit, but I think it does have to be able to be sustainable, and something that's a phrase that I've heard oftentimes is if there's no margin, there's no mission, right? If you can't make a profit margin or make money, then over time, you're not going to be able to help patients because you're going to run out of money eventually. Let's see. AI generated health information, the accuracy, it depends. It depends on the source, depends on the model. There are what we call hallucinations and synthetic data that's being created, right? And so there's always going to be a risk of inaccurate data. And when it comes to things like maybe diagnoses or recommendations, I think AI models can get to be better than humans, but it depends on how they're trained, what data they're trained on, and what specific parameters are placed into the development of the models. All right. Well, Shubhang, I think we've reached the end of the workshop. So I don't know if this group needs anything, but thank you for hosting, and hopefully this is helpful for those in the hackathon.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. Young, for hosting or participating and leading this workshop. And thank you everyone for attending. Um, we'll be recording it. We have recorded it and we'll be sending that out at some point. But good luck to everyone in the hackathon. Thank you.
Great. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.